Harry, what's the name of your podcast?
The name of the podcast is Sales Made Easy.
Okay.
And we are going live as of right now. So let's get out all of these little incidentals. So I'm Harry Spate. We're doing a live podcast of Sales Made Easy with the one and only Pablo at BeTheStage.live, also known as Pablo Gonzalez. Now, for those of you who don't know Pablo, someone mentioned his name and I said, I need to talk to this guy. I think the words were, he's doing what you want to be doing, Harry, as far as building a community. So it didn't take long for me to connect with Pablo. This was a few months ago. And before then, I did not have a Facebook group. And now I do. So we really want to talk about this, Pablo, today, and really what are the benefits of growing a community and how that's good for business. So welcome to this live edition of Sales Made Easy. What's a good word?
Harry, thank you for having me, man. I love this. Well, in my story, you'll find out there's nothing I like more than like a live broadcast instead of a community group. But even more, what I really like was the phone call that we had, right? Like I was on Florida I-4 heading down to see a client. And I remember just like one of these connections is like when you talk to somebody who, number one, is you're clearly on the same exact frequency. And on top of that, they are solving for something that you have like figured out and you feel like you can really, really help. And like that feeling of like usefulness and being of service and being of value is, I think, what we all chase as entrepreneurs. So I remember that conversation just being like, man, this is awesome. So I'm pumped to do it some more, man.
All right, great. Yeah, I had the same feeling. And this is all one of those things that, when you want to do some collaboration together,
yeah,
it's not like, oh man, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was a little nervous at the start of this because I get nervous before I go live. And I asked Pablo how he wanted to be introduced, and he just was so calm and casual. It's like, oh yeah, okay, we're not saving babies here. And so we're going to get into it. So thanks again, Pablo. Now, for those of you who don't know, can you give us a little bit of a background about what it is that you do, Pablo?
Yeah, man. I've just been on a mission to prove community creation as a viable way of business development for about 9 years. When I found myself inside of a church, it was my brother's funeral. 1,200 people showed up, and at that moment, I kind of looked around, and they say that in moments of like great pain come great clarity. And I was looking around and I saw these 1,200 people, and I started thinking about how, the last 2 years in this battle with pancreatic cancer, these 1,200 people showed up and made our life much more livable. And they're really carrying us at this moment. That was the hardest moment of our life. And thinking about how this community, like this sense of community being this thing that could give us so much value in such a time of need. And thinking to myself, man, I could never leave this, right? I could never like leave this value behind. And the reason why that was important is because I've been, pretty actively questioning my role inside the Catholic Church since I was like a teenager. And when I had that feeling, it kind of took me to this place of, doesn't matter how I feel about the institution, this thing that they have provided for me, I could never walk away from. And therefore I will never walk away from it. And, it's funny how the brain works, but immediately I was like, oh, that's churn. That's just off for churn. Like I was a client that was thinking about not renewing, and now I'm in forever. And immediately my head goes to, oh, wait a minute. Other businesses do this, because if I buy a Harley Davidson, I can't go out and buy a Honda motorcycle 2 years later because I'll lose all my friends. And, like, it was just one of those like moments of great clarity where I thought there's something here of this like business case for community and how to do it for business. And I've just been on that mission for the last 9 years, iterating through it. And I've realized that a couple of really crucial things, which is that community is rarely a Monday morning problem for a business, right? Like nobody's like, hey, it's Sunday night. I haven't solved for this community thing. My boss is really going to ask me for that tomorrow morning. I'm getting the scaries. They generally ask about other things. And as an entrepreneur, if you're going to solve a problem, you got to, if you're going to solve a long-term problem for someone, you got to be able to solve their short-term problems on the way to the long-term problem. And so if I was ever going to get this thing to take off, I had to find a way to build community as a North Star while satisfying short-term goals. And what I realized, and then the other big thing that I realized was that in order to do that, you need to have like a building block of it, right? And for me, the building block is, if you're going to make a community, it's got to center around some kind of event, right? Like people need to gather. People need to mix, but the way that people think of events, whether they're digital or they are in person, they really overcorrect for how many people they can get there and how cool they can make the organizer look and maybe a couple of people on the stage look. And I've realized that if you approach events from the standpoint of, instead of thinking about quantity of people there, you think of quality of conversations and subject matter. And how you can reverse engineer content from it that doesn't just highlight the organizer or the event itself, but instead highlights the people that attended it in a way that makes it clear that if you fully buy into this thing, this is a way for you to accomplish your own goals and get known and be validated in the things that you do. Then you have like a real building block for this community mechanism thing, right? Because you get to use the content in your short-term goals to drive marketing. You are, creating these experiences for people where they sets up nicely for partnership because you're showing up as someone who wants to give by creating these content things. And people show up because when people show up for events, they're no longer really showing up for the content of the event because you can get that anywhere. People show up to events because of the people there. So if you're like mindful of the fact that you need to be promoting the people that are there, that's what the consumer is actually asking about. So I call it experiential content marketing. This idea of like approaching events this way as a building block for community is what my company actually does at the end of this long story of what I'm working on as a mission here.
Oh my goodness. You only give me about 37 directions to go with here. So, really good. And even though it's 9 years later, my condolences for losing a brother. It had to be extremely difficult for your family and you. And yet, like you mentioned, sometimes out of horrible things, something good comes out of it. And, I can see by the comments here that someone's thanking you and they're already looking at the value that you're bringing here. Is that, you tied this all in to the bigger picture, to the why there. I don't know if anyone noticed, but when you go back to your days about thinking about leaving Catholicism and the impact that the community had, and now you're kind of spreading this message about community and business, really touches on your why. And I think that's really impactful that people sometimes miss out on that. And what I also love is the fact that you're highlighting individuals, people, the stories of people that are attending these events versus just the ones who are on the main stage, because really this is where I think the community isn't how great am I, but how great are these people? So what's your thought on that?
Well, if we're gonna go in order there, the why is. So I guess I'll go even deeper, right? Number one, business is a relationship game, right? The atomic unit of business is relationships, right? So if we're not out here trying to build relationships, what are we trying to do? And that's honestly the thing that I've cared about most of my whole life. And I realized that, number one, if you want people to connect with what you're doing, it's not about trying to start a conversation with them. It's about entering a conversation already happening in their head, right? So you're not gonna really ever totally convince anybody of anything if you can't tap into something that they believe in, that they can relate to, that they want to enroll in, which is why I think the why is important, which is why leading with the problem is important, which is why leading with vulnerability is important. So people, connect through that as well. And the story of my brother, thank you for the condolences. I really see it as, this great gift that my brother gave me, right? Like I see him as he's a tragic hero that sacrificed for many of us to learn these amazing lessons that we've had from his passing. So, and it took me a while to get comfortable leading with that. But I do see that if I do want to honor his legacy, then I can't be afraid of talking about it, and at the risk of whatever. And it also helps in this connective piece, right? So we can talk about this idea of the why and the problem, and the story of like how you actually implement that stuff. But beyond that, the idea of highlighting others is, right, just the difference between an audience and a community, right? Like an audience is a one-way conversation between attractive figure and the people in the audience, right? But like if I'm really here trying to connect with Yvonne and Juan Diego, who's already commenting in here, I want them to feel like they own a part of the stage. I want them to feel that it's a multi-vector conversation, where Yvonne can say something like, love the thought of community building as a North Star while satisfying short-term goals. And me acknowledging her value being here by giving me that feedback as like, man, that's great. What else does she have to offer? I'm sure she has other great ideas. Right. So like, if it's the simple mentality of, if you tell everybody that you're trying to be king, people are either going to compete with you, fear you, or maybe revere you. If you tell people that your goal is to be a kingmaker, then everybody that wants to be king wants to be your friend. Right. So that's why my company's called Be the Stage. I think it's more powerful to be the stage than to be the star of the stage. Because if you show up in a way as like, hey man, I am a stepping stone on your path to success, people want to work with you.
Yeah. It's really, really good. And Yvonne, who is here, has a huge community as well. And so I'm sure she could give us a lot of thoughts that go along with this. So feel free to put something there, Yvonne, in your comments. But what I love about this is really it's this whole idea of giving to others, the relationship that you mentioned that is so important. It goes way beyond money. I started this Facebook group regarding selling with dignity and sales training. And I have to admit that I was really apprehensive about getting this started. It was on my mind, Pablo.
Yeah.
I'd like to say for a couple of hours, but it's really a couple of years. And there are things that held me back. I was afraid of the commitment. What would happen if I started and it didn't last? The community is a long time. And then I just said, what am I doing? I'm building community on LinkedIn. I'm building it on TikTok and other places. It's like, what am I afraid of? And once I got in, literally the first day, I realized, I said, these are people that have similar values that I do, and I want to be around them. And it's just like, they're not foreigners. They're not, they're not people that are strangers, using the word foreigners like strangers. They're not strangers. You got my Spanish and English going here when I heard you with your accent, extranjeros. But anyway, I digress. But it's this group, this tight-knit group. And you mentioned the Harley Davidson. You can look at Margaritaville and Jimmy Buffett's group. You can look at sports teams. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. And the businesses that are doing this, where they've built up a community, I mean, not only do they have huge fans, but the likelihood of the repeat business. And I was reading one of your articles where you're talking about word of mouth and the cost of client acquisition and so forth.
Yeah.
There's other benefits other than just the community. There's also the financial stability of your business as well.
I mean, I call it less leads, more revenue, right? It's word of mouth marketing leads to less people needing to get on to create more revenue. And when you think of business as a very simple equation of cost of client acquisition plus operations has to be less than lifetime value of a client, we can either be trying to compete in the advertising commodity world of pay-per-click and all these ads and whatnot that, you might be able to unlock a lever there, but in time, that cost of acquisition goes up and the lifetime value that you're acquiring from those people go down. Or you can be really trying to, build this like kind of flywheel effect of word of mouth marketing and community building that really does lead to your best clients, right? Like the people that stay for a long time, the people that refer their friends, the people that will validate you if somebody else is like, should I do business with, right? Like there's this concept, right? Like if you're on a bus and you're hungry and you overhear two people talking about how the best pizza place in the world is just 2 blocks away, you're getting off at the next stop and you're going, right? So as a business, I just like to be thinking about how can I engineer conversations between two people that really believe in me, in front of somebody that's wondering whether or not I make sense in their life without me around, right? Like that's all I really think about as far as a go-to-market strategy when it comes to community building.
Yeah, really. So if you think about the cost of that compared to the cost of lead gen, I mean, no real comparison. I mean, because lead gen can be ridiculously expensive. And yet here you have, this is an opportunity for even very small businesses, I think of, and let me run this by you. But say I have a small business and I am in the, just pick a business. I am a landscaper.
Good
okay,
one.
Now I work and I put out a newsletter for my landscaping business. And in it, I highlight some of the stuff we're doing, but I also highlight some of the businesses that I'm serving. And now some of these businesses I could recommend, here's Be the Stage. This company is excellent. You should look into that.
Yeah.
Isn't that how it kind of can multiply even for a very small? I'm randomly going out on this example here, but work with me on this. What's your thought of just even for a very small business?
It's a great example, man. If my landscaper sends me an email saying I'm working with this amazing marketing company that's crushing it for me, I'm going to be super interested in it, right?
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Highlighting others that way, right? And I'm more likely to open the email from my landscaper that's recommending who the best services are in his business than the email from my landscaper saying, look, another beautiful lawn. I just don't care about that.
Right.
So like you got to show up with value or else it doesn't work. And the best way to create more value is by leveraging other people's value, right? Because that's infinite. There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that says, in my walks, every man I meet is in some way my superior. And in that I can learn from him. Right. And you take that to heart. There's just every conversation is an opening into somebody's experience that is inevitably different than yours. Therefore, they've learned something different. And you can really leverage that almost infinitely when you start multiplying content creation and the reaches of that. So like it could be this email that your landscaper is selling, or your landscaper could be like, hey, the third Tuesday of the month, I host a, small business group where I bring in a local expert that I think is really, really interesting. And you get to meet other cool people. And then when you go there, we have a camera crew on site that allows you to create new headshots or different, right? Like it's just, there's very different ways that you can do this experiential content marketing thing in a way that you drive an experience that adds value to the people coming. That also validates what you're doing even further, that allows you to keep building, this like snowball of like stuff that you offer others that gets elongated by the long tail of content creation and the fact that has no borders and can always go viral and you can always go back to it and leverage it in different ways, right?
Oh my goodness, this is so good. So now my gears are turning.
Yes.
And that takes a lot at my age for the gears to turn. It needs a lot of oil. And so forth. But we're dealing with the landscaper. It could be an IT company, it could be whatever, right? Could be a CPA, accounting firm.
Yeah.
Getting people together, making it about them, creating an experience for them. Did you just say like headshots or something? I mean, you take photo. What a great idea.
Right?
Bring in the local headshot expert.
Yeah.
Gets everyone feeling great about themselves. There's a number there that's associated with it financially.
Mhm.
But how much better, like content wise, the smiles would that all relate to? And then the person who is thinking about doing business with this company, right? Or thinking about giving a referral, saying, who would I rather be doing business with than someone that's giving me this, does a great job first, but then is giving me this great experience as well? Man, that is, why aren't more people doing this? That just blows my mind that you don't see more of that. It's like,
yeah, me
we're
too, man. Tell
creating
them,
this idea.
Harry.
Is this what you do?
I think, in that whole thing of like everyone's unique, I think I uniquely have this like life experience and whatnot that makes me obsessive about this type of stuff. But I completely agree, man. My kind of aha moment around this. So, like, first of all, I'm gonna take what you said a step further, and then I'm gonna go back to like how I figured this stuff out. But you don't even, if you bring the headshot guy, like Harry, you're a guy that wants to create thought leadership content, right? And you want to create a book and you want to do all this stuff. You could tell the local videographer, hey, if you come and set up a headshot station, you get to get all the leads from my event as like people that are potential, are potential leads for you later, in exchange for you being the official videographer of my event, in exchange for me getting really high quality video content of me talking to XYZ and sharing my keynote, whatever, right? Like, it's like, I call it the Huck Finn thing, right? Like I've just kind of always been like a older version of Huck Finn, of just like getting other kids to paint the fence for him. But man, I had a couple of aha moments around this. Have you ever heard of the Museum of Ice Cream?
No, please
So,
share.
Museum of Ice Cream is this thing that started in New York. They found like a couple of commercial real estate spaces, and they built out like 6 different sets that are just like wildly photogenic, with like a swing that's like a chariot you can swing on, and like a pool of sprinkles that you can lay in, with like a couple facts about museums on like each different room, and like a sample every like third room. And it went completely viral, and it's become this thing that tours the country. They had it in Miami, San Francisco, always sold out, low cost event, whatever. And I was talking to my buddy in Miami at the time when it had come to Miami, and he's like, "Have you heard about this thing? I'm bringing like 4 outfits because I want 7 different pictures inside the tub of sprinkles for my Instagram." And I'm like, "Huh, is this the future of marketing? Is like how you reverse engineer somebody being able to like populate their Instagram feed best? Is this where we are?" Right? And we are, right?
We are.
Like,
yeah.
Why can't you do that in your trade show booth? Right? Like, why can't you do that at your event? Right? So like, I had that aha moment. And then as I was kind of on the earlier parts of building my company in 2019, I started getting invited on podcasts and whatever. And when I got invited to my first like in-person podcast, the marketing director of these people, who's like one of my best friends now, Cody Adams, I work with her with a bunch of different clients. She took an awesome picture of me with like a microphone and like the headset that made me look like I'm an on-air personality. It's literally my headshot of LinkedIn and everywhere that I sent my headshot to. And I walked away there thinking, oh, she just took a picture of me being interviewed on her, boss's podcast. And I'm now going to use this picture to represent myself all the time. So like, is it that easy? Is it just, how can I create a scenario where I'm giving you a piece of content that you now want to use to promote yourself? And it really is that easy. You can find partnerships that way and at a very low lift.
Have you always been this creative? I mean, it's like, I love these light bulb moments or these aha moments that come up. Is this something that you feel like you're kind of gifted with, or?
I mean, today, the answer is yes.
Okay.
I would tell you that it's probably 6-7 years ago. My wife's an architect, and she like thinks very deeply about creativity. And she's of the mind. Creativity is creating a connection between two things that seemingly were unconnected before. And I've learned that through her. Before learning that through her, I thought creativity was like how I paint or how I draw, right?
Okay.
So I never gave myself that credit before.
Yeah.
But once I realized that I'm a creative dude and I started telling people, oh, you know what? I think I'm creative. The response I got from everybody was like, duh, bro, you're the most creative person I know. I'm like, oh, okay.
Funny?
Yeah, I am. I guess this like interconnecting of words and being funny is a version of creativity, I guess. But yes, I do believe myself to be very creative now.
It's so good. As you bring this up, I was at an event, Creative Con in Chicago recently, and I struggled with the word creative. I looked at myself, I said, I'm not a painter, I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician. But then when you look at what you create in life, and all the things that you do and the places you live and the home and the family and the work that you do. And it's like, so when you looked at it that way, it's like, yeah, I guess I've been selling myself short for a long time. But once you have the idea that you're creative, that you are creative, then you can help multiply the output from that just by having the right attitude. And once you say I'm all in on this versus I'm not, it's a whole different world. Thoughts?
Yeah. Man, I could not agree with you more. Right. Like it's funny, man, because we get growing up, like when you're a kid, you're just like so much more willing to like go with the thing that you had in your brain. And, as we grow up, we just get filled with all these other ideas of what we should be doing. And I would say, it's definitely germane to this conversation, because had I not given myself license to chase this thing as a mission, I would have still, I would have just taken that promotion to be the head of business development for a construction company and never like done all this type of stuff. But getting out of your own way and giving yourself license to call yourself creative and believing in your own ideas and having a couple cheerleaders in your life that will validate that for you, and knowing who those people are and who to listen to about that, I think is a big deal, right? Like I talk to engineers all the time who think they're not creative. I'm like, you're a freaking engineer, man. Like you by definition are creative.
Right.
You're just not performing arts. That's all.
Yeah. It is interesting what goes on in the human mind, and what can potentially hold us back. And I'm doing, again, I'm going to go back to this thing about the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like, I'm giving a speech tied into ego. And I look at ego like you got to let go of who you are. And in a sense, like, don't think too much of yourself, right? The negative side of ego. But there's an aspect of ego that sometimes I forget, is that you have to have a healthy amount, a healthy degree of ego. And if you look at it in the self-esteem side of things, now I've been selling for 25 years. I've been coaching sales leaders and, sales teams. I should be able to say I'm a sales expert without hesitancy. Okay. So here's where the negative aspect of ego came in. I was actually doing a live the other day, and I said something about bringing down. I said, I'm a sales expert. And then I said that tongue in cheek. I am so concerned about stuff that doesn't matter. It came out of me like I was still questioning. And I can look at someone else that's been doing something for 25 years who says, well, I'm not really an expert. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure you could be you could call yourself an expert, but when it's our own self, golly, it's like, does this project ever get complete?
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering.
I mean, man, I am not an expert in this, but I have had a lot of negative self-talk. I'll tell you that right now. I like how Brene Brown puts it. This whole idea that like that voice inside your head is like the meanest person that you talk to every day, right? Like if people talk to you the way that you talk to yourself, you would not be friends with those people. So, you need to have a healthy sense of ego, which means that you gotta like, I had a big, and I think entrepreneurship will do this to you, right? Like the journey of self-worth is real, right? Like it'll stop you from doing the things that you intuitively know you should be doing because other people think it should be done that way. It'll make you bring on, partners when you don't really, when what you really just need to just go do it instead of like doubting yourself. It'll make you bring on clients that you shouldn't be serving. But it's an important part of the journey, man, for sure.
Yeah, without question. So let's just get
I
back.
will say though, Harry,
okay.
one of the things that's great is connecting with that as a as a vulnerability on the why, right? Like your ability to be on stage and like self-deprecate some and be like, yeah, I'm an expert, but you're a freaking holding a mic in front of a bunch of people. Of course you're an expert, right? Like that makes you likable. So that helps too.
Yes. And then there's and I deal with it, Pablo, but it's interesting when I look back and I said, did I just say that? Because it's, and then years ago, not even that long ago, but yeah, maybe a year ago or so, I probably would have not done the live in the first place. Yeah. But if I was recording that, I probably would have stopped and hit erase and redone it or something, right? Edit it. And now it's just I'm comfortable inside of my skin. It's you've got to reach a point in life where you can just say, I am who I am. I'm going to make mistakes. People are not looking in this group are not looking at my mistakes and saying, Harry, you're an idiot. And if they did, they wouldn't be in the group.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not the brightest bulb, but I mean, I'm thinking that's the case. So when we have these negative thoughts about community and what is the negative side of it, all I'm saying is you don't really have to worry about that stuff. People are drawn to you, like you said, because it's who you are. It's what you represent. It's more than he said 47 things that were really good, 3 that weren't so good. So we'll keep them this week. No one's keeping track.
Yeah.
So it's you, the picture, and your company, your brand. I mean, think of Harley Davidson had some lemons over the years.
Yeah.
Right. Jimmy Buffett had some bad songs. I mean, Yankee fans have to admit that 2004 wasn't great for them because I'm a Red Sox fan. But we still stick with the team. All right. So I'm ranting. You go. What's your thought here on all this?
No, I like it, man. I think it's the idea of what makes you stick with the team, right? Like at the end of the day, what makes you stick is kind of going back to the why and the problem and the thing. Like I doubt that you would. I haven't been in your Facebook group, Harry, but I'm assuming that inside that Facebook group, everybody there wants to get better at sales and believes in your ability to help them with that, right? So like you are showing up as like, hey, we're here because we have this thing that we're trying to solve. I'm an attractive figure in that ecosystem, so you're all here. If you really didn't have value to provide others and you weren't very clear about like why people are there, there wouldn't be interaction in that group, right? Like people would either not show up or whatever, right? So like you have to have, it's almost like building a company, man. When you're building a community, you have to have this like mission that you can unify around. And then what generally happens is it starts with this like evangelist on a mission, and you're like out there with a point of view about what's wrong with things and the way the world is and where it's headed. And like the problem with, if you're here when it's headed there, you're going to suffer like this. So like, let's move into this world right here. That way in the future, once it shifts, you're there, right? Like that is the structure of like a point of view story. And then once that evangelist will start belly to belly doing that stuff, right? Like when you're doing this stuff one-to-one, you're making your own content, whatever. If that starts resonating with the people that you're interacting with, you're going to find that it'll attract a certain group of people that are really into it, that allow you to have like the foundation of like when community starts, to me, is when you go from being the sole evangelist to like finding your team of evangelists, right? Like when you go from being Superman to being the Avengers, is when you start having a shot at this thing. And it's also the most dangerous moment, right? Because when it's you out in the world with this promise, you control for what the promise, how stupid it can get, right? Or like how, like you can control for the over promise, under deliver danger of it, right?
Yep.
Once it goes beyond you and you have your team of Avengers, now it's time to really get clear on the rules of the game of what we really believe that this thing can do for you, and where we, like, there is no inclusion without exclusion, right? So like what we really believe in and what we really don't, so that this isn't just like a catch-all, everybody comes in, because then it's not a community. And then you're bound to disappoint people, right? So like getting really clear on this like point of view story of where the world is going, where it's coming from, the problem with it, and where it's going, and how the thing that we are working on together fits into solving that gap. That is, to me, the unifying piece of the community. That it's like the bat signal that attracts the Batmans, right? And then once you have that bat signal, then you're attracting people. And then the next phase is like figure out what it looks like when we're all around, right? Like most people think of a community, they're like, I'm going to have a Facebook group, I'm going to invite all my friends to it, and I'm going to shoot it to my list. Then I'm going to get 200 people in there, and then crickets, right? Beyond you posting a couple of different things. But if what the announcement is like, hey, we're here to solve for this thing, and then you have like a planned, set of activities that allow people to come together, that start to ritualize some things, start to ritualize some language. Now, anybody that comes in starts to really understand whether they belong and not belong. And, the job of the community builder is to really prop up the people that want to get active in this like mission and shine a light on them in a way that gives anybody coming in new to think, man, if I get really involved in this, then I could be like that. And being like that gives me a certain amount of value in here. And it also gives me a certain amount of value outside of the walls of this community. Then it really works.
Oh, it's really good. So does this all come together at once, would you say? Or is this like a graduation over time where the pieces start falling into place here?
It definitely, this is not a single moment.
Okay,
right?
All right. Because I don't have all that.
No, for sure.
I'm nervous.
Well, Harry, that's why I believe in this experiential content marketing thing, right? Because the experiential content marketing piece is, this is what we gather around, right? Like you have to create something for people to all show up.
Yep.
That's this experience. And then while you are doing it, whether it is a live, like what you're doing and running a specific way, which we can get into in a second, or it's a panel inside of a room out at a conference, or like, at the side room of a restaurant, and you're, in your hometown or whatever. That's people coming together. And then those events, all need to have a certain, correlation to the point of view. So people like understand what the promise is of coming to this stuff and what I'm here to work on. And as you get better at reverse engineering that ability to like create content from this thing that not only props you up, but props up the people that come, and they are more and more inclined to share it. And that starts them taking ownership of it and bringing other people. Right. But yeah, that takes time. But if you approach it from that experiential content marketing experience at all of these, you're already starting with some stuff that you can use, right? Like, and things that you can create. So it kind of just solves for all things at once.
I've got to believe that, as you mentioned this, that having the conversations with people that are in your community and so what they want, and kind of letting go of the ego there, because you might have a vision of something, but it's really what the people want that should dictate a little bit, I think. Or what, am I off base on that?
I don't think you're off base. But there is a frame you have to put it around, right? Like it is, you got to get really clear on the problem that you all want to solve. And then you got to let it go as far as like, you're not going to be the whole solution, right? Like the solution doesn't necessarily have to be yours. You're there to show up and say, I want to be a part of the solution. But it's not like if all of a sudden you have a community that really go back to the Catholic Church. Let's not go back to the Catholic Church, because I think that has other like connotations that people will have a hard time. But like, if we are getting together around, hey man, how do we all get better at sales? And let's say you have 200 people in that Facebook group and 30 of them won't shut up about the upcoming election. You're like, go start your own group,
All
dude.
right. Okay. Yeah.
Like
Yep.
if that's what you want, no, that's not what we're here to do,
Mm.
but I don't, like my framework, sales made easy and selling with dignity, doesn't have to be the thing that you choose. You just have to choose to be in here wanting to be better at this thing. And you can borrow whatever I'm doing and mold it into whatever you want, then we're really working in community. And if you're committed to the problem, then you won't have a problem evolving with what the solution needs to be.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, I wasn't thinking that it could go to such an extreme outside of the reason, but along those lines of what you just described, having the rules, knowing with clarity what you want, could definitely help keep those types of
Yeah.
incidents to
Yeah.
a minimum.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more along the lines that that group can take you to a place where you may not have considered, that's
Correct.
still within the boundaries that you
Yeah.
set up. But having an open mind, you might say, this could be an avenue we go down or something. Or
That's the goal.
yeah. Okay.
Like
Okay.
the goal is you're outsourcing intelligence from not just
Mm,
yourself having to carry it, right?
mhm.
And that to me is there's a discipline that I really care about. It's called category design.
Okay.
That is essentially coined by this book called Play Bigger, that was written in 2016, and what they did this study of category designers in the S&P 500, and they realized that people that applied this strategy were only about 70 or something companies in the S&P 500, but they made up something like 70% of the growth of the
Mm,
S&P 500.
okay.
Right? So this idea of category design is how you become synonymous with the problem that you solve to dominate a category and become a category king, right? Like the reason why we call this an iPhone and not a smartphone. And we call it, Ubering and Netflix and
Right.
chill. And, like when your company becomes a verb kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And what they found is that the people that do this, they lead with the problem. And they don't just lead with the problem with everything, right? Like they're saying the difference between category designers and non-category designers is that if I'm trying to design a category, instead of promoting my brand, promoting my product, promoting these different things, I'm promoting the problem. I'm evangelizing the problem, because he or she who can state the problem the best will be known to have the best solution. And the other side of that coin is this idea that if you are going to approach it this way and lead with the problem, you need to be committed to it, right? Like if you are evangelizing a problem and it turns out that your solution is not the best thing to solve that problem,
Mm,
then you need to evolve your business model to be the best solution for that problem, or else what are you doing?
right.
Right? So to me, this idea of that works, that to me is a crucial element of community. And it's why I care about category design so much as a discipline, as a philosophy for doing business. Because if you really are not a mercenary that's in here to capture market share and make money, and you're a missionary in search of solving a problem, and you figure out that your software really isn't moving the needle for people trying to solve the problem, you have a decision to make. You can either keep working on this problem, or you can just try to justify why your software is good. And the
Mm,
person that does that gets caught in becoming a commodity trap and the selling people just to sell people. Whereas the person that continues to tack their North Star to this problem that they're trying to solve is always going to show up as a missionary, is always going to show up in this place of yeah, I'm here to do the best thing for you. And you're a sales guy, right? Like, how much better are you at selling when you actually believe in what you're doing?
yeah. 100%. Well, I'm an imposter some days, but
Yeah,
just kidding.
I got
Little
it.
humor
We all are.
based little humor based on a previous part of our conversation.
Yeah.
So this is, what's your thought? I mean, is there an example? You said the software company, but is there someone famous that that comes to mind, that you could think of, a business that's had community and then they weren't the best that there was and people left?
You know, I don't think I've I don't know if I have that. I don't know if I
Okay.
have that idea of from community there. I have a whole bunch of ideas of communities that do work because they do this, and communities that like people that try to build community, and when they don't do
Yeah.
this, it doesn't work. Right.
Yeah.
But I've never seen, I don't know, man. I think
Yeah.
once you get to community, like it's such a powerful moat that I don't that's a really great question, man. I don't know of anybody that's ever built a super valuable community and then fumbled the ball.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right.
you know?
But that didn't make an adaptation to the times or make an adjustment here and there. I mean, the reason I ask is like sometimes we can look at companies like Blockbuster,
Mhm.
Toys R Us that went away for a while. I think they've kind of made a resurgence, but
Yeah.
some of these companies, they had it going on.
Yeah.
And then, it's like they stopped listening or, they weren't taking advice even from people who might have looked at it for just the Blockbuster
Yeah.
Netflix example. Say,
I mean,
well, why wouldn't, right? Thoughts?
I can definitely break down Blockbuster Netflix from a category design example, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Netflix went in there and saw people hate getting charged for not bringing your videos back,
Mm,
right? Like
yeah.
people want to watch movies, but what they don't want to be is beholden to like you not rewinding something and like getting racked if something happens. So in their category, their category design, notice they called themselves Netflix. They didn't call themselves DVD by mail. They
Mm,
knew that one day we're going to just be able to like watch whatever we want, whenever we want, not worrying about that.
mm,
But in order to get there, the first problem we needed to solve is subscription model instead of per use model. And if
mhm.
you're on a subscription model, hey man, now the business works in a way that you can keep this DVD as long as you like. You just get to have like 2 to 3 DVDs at a time. And, since you're
Right.
funding it through subscription, no big deal. Right.
Yeah.
And then eventually, as the context continued to shift, then it became on demand streaming, streaming video, which is what they're
Yeah.
what they're the category kings of. But they led with the problem. They
Mm,
first solved that thing of like, well, I forgot to return the Home Alone video, so now I'm about to get charged $30. I could have bought the freaking thing.
mhm.
They solved that first, and then they continue to just like notice how Netflix was revolutionary when they decided to release a season and not do it episodically. They would just release a full season,
Mm,
right? At the time, the thinking was this is going to lead to churn because people are just going to come in, watch what they want to see, and leave. But what it led to, because of their radical generosity around the problem that they solve, which is just like what you want to watch whenever you want to watch, right? Like they
right.
they coined they coined a term called appointment viewing and said that that's not what we really want to do, right?
Mm,
And they evangelize this new future of just like you don't have to have an appointment to watch what you need to watch, and they have always performed on that level, from the subscription piece to the giving you the entire season to whatever, like to then understanding that what they just need to do is create the content themselves and bring you as much things as they can instead of trying to buy other ones, right? So like
mm,
Netflix is a category king because they are legendary category designers in that regard, because they have always kept that problem as the North Star, as opposed to, wanting to like give you one episode on Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, because they have some launch strategy that's going to get you to like work for them better as opposed to work for you better.
yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, great stuff, Pablo. This has been an outstanding conversation. What is it that we've missed that you would like to bring up regarding this community building that you might want to touch on here before we finish up? Is there anything?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And
Okay.
I honestly, I think that that's the best question to finish a podcast on. It's like, hey, anything else? Right? Like you always get like the best insights there, right? By the way, Mike McQuillan, I've been resisting Netflix for a year and suddenly I'm interested. I got you, Mike. It's funny, man, because once you get into this category design thing and start seeing it, you start going down the rabbit hole. Like this company, Liquid Death, I can go on for like hours about how they're legendary category designers. I don't buy their water, but because they're such good category designers, I've bought like $200 worth of their merch.
Yeah.
Like I'm just
I see that.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So,
That's cool.
the thing I wanted to share, is that this idea of the way that you run one of these community, like creating events, right? This like experiential content marketing, in order for it to work on the back end, is the understanding that people that have these events don't have, that there's 4 vectors of relationships happening when you have a stage with a program and you're interviewing somebody, right? There's the relationship between the host and the guest, right? That is high level relationship of someone that you really, really want to be guilty by association with. You're sharing a vulnerable moment because you're both on stage in some kind of live thing, whether it's what we're doing now or at a conference or in a back room of a hotel or whatever. I call that the new golf, right? That's like, if you want to create friends with somebody, like plan an event with them and like have them on your stage and like have a fireside chat, because it's a really great relationship builder. But then there's also the relationship between the host and the audience, right? The ability for the host to acknowledge the audience, speak to them in a singular, as a singular person, opening up comments in live version via Q&A or in this version via the chat, and acknowledging them and recognizing people in the room. And if they come back, giving them a nickname and making them feel at home, and, you know, like giving them this like acknowledgement that like, hey, you're adding value here, so go, you know, like giving them license to add value. Then there is the relationship between the guest and the audience, right? The way that you facilitate that is by making sure that whenever that happens, you as a host inject as much context into the equation as you can. And by that, I mean, you know, let's say, Harry, I'm interviewing you and Yvonne shows up, and Yvonne's a regular on my show, and she comes in with a question of just like, yeah, Harry, but how do I take people from my community and actually get them into like my sales funnel, you as a sales expert? I wouldn't just say, oh, hey, you know, like repeat that question. I would say, hey, Yvonne, who has a great community around XYZ, and she's a community builder, and this is her business. Harry, she's asking this because I know that you are a sales expert that sells with dignity. So it's like she's trying to accomplish this because she's this kind of person, right? So what I did there essentially is I made Yvonne feel like I just warm introed her to my friend that's on stage that she thought was an attractive figure. And I gave you, Harry, extra ammunition to have a better response that's more contextual to her, that's going to be more valuable to her, right? So like that thing creates connection. The chance of her then reaching out to you on LinkedIn later is much higher. The chance of you remembering is better. She has a better experience. You had a better experience. When I then cut that piece of content, it's going to be obvious that if you show up to the show, you get to ask Harry a question. You know, like that is the other vector. And then the fourth vector is the person to person, right? Like how can I get Yvonne and Mike and Juan to like see each other as peers inside of a chat and get them talking, right? And you do that through this adding context to what they're saying, acknowledging things that they say, when they say something really intelligent, like I've been resistant or funny, like what Mike said, like acknowledge it. So somebody else sees him as, oh, this guy's funny. That's like a witty thing to say, right? Like, and most people, they really just think about the relationship with the guest and maybe the relationship with the audience. But if you start really driving at these 4 different vectors, then it makes everything else work. Because that's what creates the back end content. That's what creates this feeling of, I call it sharing the stage, right? Like if you hear your name on the stage, I kind of shared it with you. If you hear your suggestion on the stage, you feel like you like co-created it with me. If you get to come up on the stage and take the mic, guess what? You're the star, right? So like how many different slices of stage can you offer people around you is the thing that drives the community element, because it's what gives people ownership and gives people that sense of acknowledgement of keeping coming back.
Wow. So good. This is where you want to hit rewind for those of us who have
I'm
the
definitely clipping this
Blockbuster
part.
videos. Definitely rewind this part. I don't think, yes, you know what I mean. This is really good. Pablo at bethestage.live. Is that the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, that's my email address. If not, look me up on LinkedIn. Harry and I are friends. Kind of hard to find Pablo Gonzalez on LinkedIn because it's like the John Smith of people that tend to have many kids and naming mama after themselves. But you know, look me up on LinkedIn. I want to be your friend.
Yeah, get a unique name like Spate with a couple extra consonants. No one will ever duplicate. So yeah, this has been
I'm so jealous of that, man.
Tons of value given. Thank you so much. This is awesome. I know one guy who's going to be replaying this and listening and looking for ways I can apply it. So appreciate you.
Yeah, man. You know, I like to kind of end this with Harry is obviously putting a lot of work into this. Harry, you publish this as podcast too, right?
Yep.
So if you're listening to this on a podcast, you've enjoyed what Harry's doing, man, like the least that you can do for a podcaster who puts all this work is like, just go into the app, give it the review thing, man. Like it takes 2 seconds. You don't have to write anything. You just got to hit 5 stars and give Harry a little love. If you're in his community, go like invite your friend to it, right? Like this is a labor of love. Like give him some like positive feedback of how good a job he's doing.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. The check is in the mail.
Tax day.